AudioLust HigherLove by S.G. Lewis, 15 songs, an hour and 2 minutes long. S.G. Lewis, artist that we have reviewed on this podcast a couple times. I think the last one was what Times record in 2021, or do we do another one after that? But S.G. Lewis, known as I wouldn't say like maybe dance hall-ish, just more
Dance hall, house. I mean, he's a
House.
sleeper. Again, Times
Yeah,
is the
absolutely.
last album we reviewed in 2021. I remember viewing it because it was one of my favorite albums of last year.
Mhm.
In fact, even before listening to this, even before doing this podcast, which I usually try to be very careful of because sometimes I blend songs in my head, I was listening to some of Times, like just this morning. So I was like, you got some bangers in here. You got Chemicals, you got Fall, you got Impact with Robin and Channel Triss. More on that later. But you also got One More with Nile Rodgers, and at least personally, I can't forget Back to Earth, the song that personally makes my heart melt. It's fucking great shit. But yeah.
Times is a fantastic record. It grew on me because at first I liked it, but it took me a while to get into. And then as 2021 went along and even a bit in the last year, I listened to it a bit and I enjoyed it a lot. Going into this record, it's a bit longer, I would say. But there's some of these songs I call his Roosevelt pivot, where some of it is mixing in dance hall with some 70s funk beats, disco beats and stuff. Example, the first track, Infatuation, sounds so much like a Roosevelt track. Like the way the synths are played, the bass, everything. I heard it and I was like, it's straight out of like debut record of Roosevelt when I heard that. And I was like, oh wow, all right. But not not to the point where it's like a blatant ripoff. It's just it has to be influenced by him. Like 100%. Just the way that the song is made. But that's really the only track that, and a couple others, I guess, that use some of the funk stuff. But that one, I was like, that's really influenced by that. But the rest of the record isn't necessarily super influenced by Roosevelt, but you can get some themes and ideas that he had throughout the record. I did like that track, to be fair.
Yeah, listen, I'm gonna not. You transparently, Sean, this week have a sore throat, and so like there's only a certain amount of commentary you can give. It's not that I don't love this album, it's just that like I only have a certain amount of commentary I can give about this album, is that it bangs. Like, I love it, I appreciate it. I love that you have certain tracks in here that like serve to the best. Again, let me skip to I think one of the highlights of the record, Fever Dreamer with Charlotte Day Wilson and Channel Twice. Two of the best you've got in dance music right now, both of which I happen to have seen live. Thank you, Ghost producer Kyle, for the Charlotte Day Wilson, getting me to see him live at some point. But getting me to see her live some point rather. But like, both of them are such a great mix together in electronic music. And while I felt that S.G. Lewis's last record was a little bit too rooted in the past, S.G. Lewis's newer record, AudioLust HigherLove, manages to take influences from the past, but still create a record that feels forward-thinking. And again, I never felt that S.G. Lewis's last record was too delayed or too, old head sounding, but on Audioface, we're always going to appreciate the records that are forward-thinking, and this has a little bit of, at least to mid 2024, late 2024, like staying power to it. Well, like I would still play this on playlists. I would still play this on bangers, like for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would too in that regard. I really like that track. Fever Dream is amazing. I love the features. And like even vibe like this with Ty Dolla Sign and Lucky Day, I really like the features on here, even though they're pretty few and far between. But the way that S.G. Lewis mixes everything and pairs everybody together that's on this record, it fits well. I love like the different styles and different influences that you can hear throughout the record, because even though I said earlier like the Roosevelt comparison, I like the influence, he does it in a way that it's genuine. Like you can tell when someone gets an influence and just blatantly rips off of it, right? But you can tell when someone gets an influence and it's like, hey, I have some ideas. Like I hear this, what am I going to do with this? Like, what can I do to kind of put my own spin on it? Oh, hey, this now gets me into a different idea of like some other things that I've listened to that are kind of similar. What can I do with that? And those are like, you get that throughout this record.
Audioface debates. We recently talked about Lil Yachty's record and how it had a lot of psychedelic rock influences, especially from artists like. I saw a little bit of the Avalanches in there. I saw a little bit of Tame Impala in there. There are a lot of like psych rock influences, even like Julian Casablancas type shit, right? But I don't know. I don't know if I'm willing to say that even that record that came out recently was a ripoff of these sounds. What do you think?
Um, I wouldn't say that necessarily. Hard to say. Like the Lil Yachty thing, I think it's more of like because it's not him really producing it. It's like other people producing the record. So it's like, hey, I have an idea. I want to make it. I want to make a psychedelic rock record. Who do I need to hire? Who do I want to hop onto this and everything? And what do I do to make said A and said B work? That's so it's more like the producer's fault, the producer's things of doing and that. But some of them are genuine musicians and whatnot, and you could tell with the sounds and whatnot that that production is genuine. But there's still some sounds where it's like, oh, okay, I can get your influence. I can hear the sounds that you're trying to make, and those sometimes it can feel like that in a way. But with SG Lewis, it's like because especially in electronic music because this is kind of a more of a state of the music when we get into that discussion and whenever we do that in the next couple months as we do our yearly discussion. I think it's usually in March. With electronic music, there's a lot of people that will rip off of each other, right? There's a lot of people that because it can be kind of one dimensional in a way sometimes, like especially the very popular EDM, right? A lot of people can just make the same hyphy typhy beats. A lot of people can just go, hey, this is what's popular, this is what I'm gonna make, or even like with indie music and stuff, a lot of people can be like, hey, I want to sound like Jai Paul. And then you have a lot of people that try to make that sound in the mid 2010s or Tori Ma or whoever. That happens all the time. But you have genuine people that hear it and be like, okay, I have an idea of what I want my record to sound like. Because it's like, oh, I'm taking this and I want to have my own spin on it. I want to have my own thing to where I create my own vision out of it. And you get that with AudioLust HigherLove, which is why I like this record because in EDM, there's so many people that rip off of each other. There's so many sounds that sound exactly the same. And then artists will make the same fucking record over and over and over again. But AudioLust HigherLove, I feel like is definitely a step in the right direction even compared to Times. Even though Times is a fantastic record, I feel like this is even more layered, even more complex than that, just because of the ideas and different things that they're doing with it and staying within the times. Where funk is becoming more popular, right? 70s throwbacks are becoming a little bit more popular, at least in this sphere of music. And you're still putting a modern twist on it, and you're not sounding dated in a way where it's like, oh, this sounds like something that would come out in 2018, right? So,
yeah. Another thing I like about it, I love a lot about what you just said in your commentary because, like, number one, we've been looking at for EDM albums that do a better job of, like, relating to the modern electronic music era, and that the fact that, like, we can't do this hyphy-typey shit all the time. We need to start calling back to other earlier genres like funk, like soul, like, R&B, which we on Audioface don't like calling it an R&B. We call it neopop because R&B is inherently a racist genre and a subcategory. But, like, when you get to vibe like this with Ty Dolla $ign and Lucky Day, I think that's like, Lucky Day is one of the pinnacle funk is back type folks. Ty Dolla $ign has started to get into, at least in the late 10s, early 2020s, this position where he is kind of this almost like a Snoop Dogg, like he's fine, whatever, but he's good to feature and he's a solid feature on certain records. And so I think he did a really good job here. And maybe my hottest take here might be that SG Lewis did a better funk wave bounces than Calvin Harris, even though, oh wait, he hasn't even appeared on this album. It was a different record he appeared on that we did earlier. Yeah, but like, I think this is funkier without being so over the top of your head that it feels like a Silk Sonic record. And I think that's what you need to do in electronic right now, because you can make great electronic that has full of its bleeps and bloops without, like overstepping its boundaries into funk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I agree with that, especially with
Hopefully, yeah, I was basically agreeing with you.
yeah. Well, like I like the examples of what you were doing it with, like the Calvin Harris stuff and whatnot with funk wave bounces, and yeah, and even like Silk Sonic, because sometimes with that, it's like even though it's a good record, it's a bit much at times. But overall, I think SG Lewis really knocked us out the park with an evolution of especially like electronic music and stuff, right? Like we, as Dan said, we really search for good EDM. There is not much out there that is in the mainstream and whatnot. Every once in a while you come across something here or there, but that's why you have this podcast, right? That's why we make this podcast. We does this
podcast. Shout out, we made it podcast.
Right, exactly. Shout out Season Bam Power Report, and we made a podcast talking about football
and Holly,
soccer too. And Holly. That's right, and Holly. Talking about football or soccer to y'all Americans and Canadians. But with
fuck, I did the snot thing again. Fuck you, Sean. Anyways,
with EDM, like there's just there's so much lackluster stuff out there to where you have to sift through a lot of bull crap to get to the bulk of the good. And I think we're starting to come into a pivot now where we're starting to hit a stride with EDM, and I'm hoping that we are starting to hit a stride with some records that are going to be coming out that are better. We're leaving the 2010s and like late, like just the whole period, that whole decade, and even the early 2020s behind us. And we're starting to really now develop into newer sounds, develop into newer production styles and whatnot. And hopefully, yeah, that's kind of what I want to see. But overall, I think this is a fantastic record. If you liked SG Lewis before, if you liked Times before, you will like this record. If you've like, even with me, where I liked Times, but I wasn't like a huge SG Lewis fan, like a bunch of other people that I know, I think this record's fantastic, and this is something I'm going to be listening to a lot and diving in more, especially as a longer record at 1 hour and 2 minutes long. It's going to take me a little bit to dive into some of these other tracks, but yep, fantastic.
Yeah. So it's a little bit long for 2023, but we'll allow it because it's it's definitely good. And again, there have been other artists who have taken longer efforts with their albums lately. That have been way less deserved. Arbitrary Scales, do Arbitrary Scales every week on Audioface, because our review is our review. We said how we said, how we felt. You should respect that. If you don't respect that, then you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. and rather than setting up with one of those Pitchforkian or Fantanian standard review systems with like a letter grade or a number grade, give us an arbitrary scale. Arbitrary scale this week are politicians who quoted Taylor Swift lyrics to clap Ticketmaster in the cheeks. What do you get this week, Sean?
Shit.
I mean, limited pickings based on what we've done already. So you're good.
There's Sal Nuzzo of the James Madison Institute think tank. Jesus Christ. They told lawmakers the hearing that this, in quote, a few million Taylor Swift fans would respond, "This is why we can't have nice things." That's going off of a Reputation.
Yeah. Going back to Mike Lee, even though I agree with yours more. Karma's a relaxing thought. Aren't you envious that for you it's not? Which, this pathetic exercise in politics proves nothing about politicians' tacitly naked attempt to appeal to a broader audience. It more appeals to the fact that Taylor Swift's got some bangers, and she's got some songwriting that has a really wide, powerful appeal, and can even be used in her own defense against one of the most chaotic, evil companies currently making music worse. But like Sean said and referenced earlier in the episode, Ticketmaster will definitely have to be a little bit of the conversation in our State of Music 2023 episode, which
Absolutely.
I conveniently plan so that I can have my birthday weekend off every single year.
I mean,
So, my man, and make sure we plan something like that out for you too every single year for sure. But
yes.
yeah, like let's do that.